And I'm conscious when we make this podcast and you do interviews, you do a lot. We're most of the time, if not all the time, talking to our peers or people of a similar age. But there's a whole generation like Connor who some of them have gone to uni and realized it's not for them. Some of them are learning things right now. I even think of my daughter, which are going to be unrequired with AI in the future. And so I think there's this whole different crowd that we can talk to. But I just think for someone like Connor, look, we know you've been successful. You've had a hugely successful career. It'd be good to hear some of the most important lessons that you've learned that maybe you could share with Connor. And Connor might have some questions back.
Well, cool. Well, first of all, you're lucky you get to start life fresh with none of the baggage of the rest of us, and the opportunities in the 21st century are extraordinary. I was at a social gathering a number of years ago, and a multi-billionaire walked up to me and he said, I've got twins, a boy and a girl, and on their 21st birthday, I want to give them a book of advice that I gathered from all of my friends. So if you could, I want you to write down your advice to my 21-year-olds on the occasion of their maturity. And I said, really? I said, yeah. And I'm gonna put it together with everybody else I know. And so I said, okay, I guess I can do that. And I thought that was one of those things where he was going to wait a few months and I would send it by email. But he takes out a little red book. He puts it in my hand with a pen. He says, okay, write them down now. Like, it's a big party, it's a cocktail party. Lots of people are going, around. And it's a spectacular villa looking over the Mediterranean. And I didn't really think I would be asked this question, give me advice for two, young adults. But I thought, okay, think. So I sit down and I wrote down 10 things and I handed it back to him. So I'm going to start by giving you those 10 suggestions, and then I'm going to give you some practical suggestions that I would give to anybody that go beyond the theory. Okay, so the theory. 1, focus your energy. You think you can do everything, you can't, and everybody overestimates all the things they can do. The things I regret in my life are all the good ideas I pursued to the detriment of my great idea. You're going to have 27 good ideas, and they're going to be, and Peter interviews people with good ideas all the time. And then you ask the question, well, do we have the energy to make it work? So you got to focus.
Connor, every time I do an interview with Michael, it ends with him telling me this again as well.
Focus. And that's, you go to my Twitter profile, I got laser eyes. The message of laser eyes is focus. I'm not against 1,000 things. I am not in favor of 100 things. I am simply trying to advocate for one thing. And the one thing is Bitcoin. So focus your energy. Second, guard your time. Everybody's going to actually want to take your time. There's going to be a million things you can do with your time. And when I was growing up, we had like 3 channels and we had like every night programming that was original from 8 to 11. And, there was no porn. Like, there was one Playboy magazine I saw in the woods once in my entire childhood.
Why is it always in the woods? Do you remember that? It was always in the woods.
It was sitting in some like wrecked car, and it was legendary. All the teenage boys would talk about the one Playboy magazine, and so today you've got Twitch and you've got YouTube and you've got infinite porn and you've got infinite games and you've got infinite everything. And if you look at the scourge of modernity, it's every possible thing people ever thought they might want. We figured out how to manufacture it in bulk, pharmaceutical grade, and drive the variable cost to 0. So infinite music used to be music cost money. Infinite books used to be books. I went to the library. I checked out books. I had to take them back. There was a limit on the books. So no limits today. And you really have to ask yourself the question, how are you going to spend your time? Because you could literally spend the next 30 years of your life watching chess videos on YouTube. Not playing chess, just watching the videos of other people playing chess, right? There's infinite. Hundreds of thousands of hours of chess videos to be watched. So the third piece of advice is train your mind. Train it, right? Train what? Math, learn to speak, learn a language, learn logic, especially logic and language and basic thinking skills. How you do that, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you need to go to university, right? I launched the Saylor Academy, and we've given education to 1.5 million students. We don't charge them a nickel. It's absolutely free. In my opinion, you can probably train your mind better, faster, not in a school today, right? But because the options I had when I was going through school, like when I was in high school, I could learn Spanish or French or Latin, but that's all I could learn. And I could learn 2 years of it, and I could learn at the same rate as everybody else. And I could learn 1 semester of calculus and half a semester of calculus. That's all I can learn. So train your mind, use technology to do it. The fourth, train your body, be healthy. You don't have to do things that are inflammatory and dangerous. I mean, I'm not telling you to go be a boxer or take excessive risk, but I think any kind of healthy training, the pattern you get into your entire life is important. It won't be that important in the first, like right now in your 20s or your 30s, you can get away with really, really bad behavior. There will be a greater price to pay in your 40s. It will get exponentially worse in your 50s if you engage in really bad behavior and you don't train your body. By the time you get to your 60s, sometimes the journey's over. And when you get to your 70s, you'd like to be able to walk around, and being able to walk around or into your 80s or the like is a function of the way you treat your health. So, if your body goes, your mind will go later, and life is just not that fun. Fifth, think for yourself. Everybody's going to tell you what to think. Everybody, every media organization is in the business of telling you what to think. And generally, they all have an agenda. When at some point in your life, you'll read a story and you'll ask the question, what was the agenda of the journalist that wrote the story? And what was the agenda of the media organization that published the journalist? And what was the agenda in the nation where the journalist lives? And if you start to think about all those things, then you'll realize that oftentimes in life, especially if you run a business, like I want to do something. Maybe I want to buy a product. I never bought the product before. And Peter sells a version of the product, and Danny sells a version of the product, and you sell a version of the product, and all three of you are experts. I know nothing. What I do is I try to buy from each of you, and then I triangulate between each of you. And you can tell me lies. You can tell me lies. You can tell me lies. I wouldn't know the difference. But at some point, you will rat out him. He will rat out you. You will rat out him. I will create a mosaic of it, and I will figure out what the truth is by inferring it from a bunch of distorted information. So assume everything's distorted, and it's your job to synthesize and get to your version of the truth. 6, curate your friends. Be careful the company you keep, right? Some people will make you better and they'll lift you up, and other people will drag you down. And plenty of people's lives are ruined by a bad friendship in their teens, right? Your friend wants, I'm not going to go into details. You figure it out. Choose your friends carefully, choose their values. And you have infinite choice. There's 8 billion people on the planet, right? You can find 3 friends that will work well with you. And so figure out the right ones and run from the wrong ones, cherish the right ones. 7th, curate your environment. Like, look where we are right now, right? There's good light in this room. Didn't have to be good light in this room. Peter could have picked one that has awful light, right? Pick the environment that's happy, that's healthy. Curating the environment means choose where you will live, what city, what neighborhood, how you will live. Do you want to live in a house with green grass? Do you want to live in an apartment? Think hard about that. You have more choice than you think you have. It will impact your mental health. It'll impact your physical health. For example, you study statistics, you find that the likelihood of you getting mugged or murdered is highly correlated to your pedestrian pattern. So if you actually walk down 10 blocks in a bad neighborhood and you walk back and forth every day to work in the wrong place, you're like 1,000 times more likely to get killed, mugged, murdered, whatever, right? So you made that choice. You might not realize you made that choice, but where you are and how you live makes a difference to your mental and your physical health. 8, keep your promises, whatever they are. The one thing people remember about you for the rest of your life, if you promised them something 27 years later, they will still remember if you lied to them, or if you promised them something and you didn't do it. And the problem with that is that credibility over time compounds. And if you don't have credibility, people aren't going to want to help you. They're not going to help you. In fact, they're going to actually celebrate your failure. So don't make promises you can't keep, but bend heaven and earth to keep the promises you do make. And that, obviously in business, it's the difference between businesses succeeding and failing. And like when you get in the public markets, my stock trades every day from 9:30 to 4. If people felt like I was going to do something different than what I told them, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of capital would disappear in a heartbeat when you lose credibility. So your ability to accomplish something in life is based on your credibility. So don't make promises you can't keep, and keep your promises. 9, stay cheerful, be constructive, right? The world's full of 10,000 things that are ugly and awful, but and you can talk about them ad infinitum. But if you sit with someone, for 3 hours and you talk about how awful the world is, or how much you don't like it, at some point, if you watch them, I do this with my employees. Okay, I've lived this life, okay? So I've sat with employees and I'm in a bad mood. I'm like, this isn't working. This isn't working. This is not working. This is not right. We could have done this better. We could have done this better. We could have done this better. And this is what happens to the person on the other side of the table. You start here. They're like, hey, what are we going to do today? And I'm like, and then pretty soon they're like beat down, exhausted. And then you end with that parade of horribles. You're like, so we can do this, but you've already beat them to death, right? And so they need to enjoy and look forward to their engagement with you. If you want to accomplish something, find a way to do it in a cheerful, constructive way. Cheerful, things that go viral on Twitter more often. They're like constructive, cheerful things. If you're entertaining, or you find, if I post a criticism, then some people see it, but it doesn't go that far. When I post a solution, like here's a free thing, here's a free course, here's a free resource. You can have this for free. This is a tool you can use. If like, for example, the other day I saw a really nice video on what is Bitcoin, and it had been posted by a Bitcoin advocate, and it had like 800 views because she didn't have that many followers. I thought, but this is kind of sad. This is sitting and languishing. It was like 3.5 minutes of why Bitcoin is good. So I retweeted it. And, I said, no, there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, or there'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoin, or something like that. Went to like 250,000 views. But what happened was all the other people on Twitter said, hey, this is a really good orange pilling video. And they started retweeting it. And you can see on Twitter now how people bookmark things. You can count the bookmarks. And it had the number one set of like thousands of bookmarks. Like people were bookmarking it. Like you could see in their mind, they're like, I should save this because I might need to send this to my father, my mother, my friend. It's like I post something kind of snarky or critical or pessimistic. No one's bookmarking that, And so cheerful and constructive works better. Also, you want people to look forward to seeing you, whether it's in a working environment, like I enjoy working with you, or if they're a customer, or if they're a supplier, or if they're just a friend. And then, number 10, upgrade the world. There's a lot of ways to do it. Figure out how you're going to upgrade the world. Have a way. So that's my theoretical advice for someone entering their adulthood. Practical advice, stuff that I think is useful. I wish I'd studied even more history, like especially serving a lot of history. By the way, history, his story, it's just a story, right? Alexander the Great took Herodotus with him on his campaigns. That's why Alexander is the Great, because he hired a historian to write the book about him. Okay? There's 10,000 stories, okay? And if you read all the stories, there's the story from the point of view of 1,000 different Indian tribes, from the point of view of the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Europeans, the French, the Spaniards, the Americans. Everybody's got the story, the Romans, the Gauls, the Russians, the Japanese, Chinese. They've all got the story from their point of view, and they're the hero. And the other tribe is the villain, the barbarian, the whatever. So if you read history, enough of it, then you'll be empathetic and you'll be better able to interpret what's going on now. For example, like all these things, taxes, there were monopolies on who could bake in New York City in the 1600s. There was a monopoly on who could make a hat. You had to have a 7-year apprenticeship before you could make a hat. They're all, who wanted them? The hat makers in London wanted them. There are monopolies on who could trade with what. We had tobacco notes as money, and then there was a massive fight because someone wanted to cap the price of the tobacco money, and the ministers getting paid in tobacco had a fit and appealed to the crown. When you read history, all these things, then you realize everything you're seeing today, it's not new. And when someone says we have to do this because this is unique, it's not unique, right? You won't be so easily manipulated. So history is good. In math, a lot of things I studied in math aren't useful. Calculus of variations, differential equations, complex things like that. The only way in which those are useful, it's useful that I studied vector math or linear math because I could think about vectors and I could think n-dimensionally. So the idea of n-dimensional math, the idea of nonlinear math, some of these things are useful to study, but the actual technique, unnecessary, because the computer and now the AIs will do it for you in a split second. But I tell you the kind of math that I use every day, every hour of the day. And if you don't have this, you will never be successful in business, and you probably won't be successful in politics or life. And that is applied statistics. And by applied statistics, I mean...
Can you just explain that quickly?
I mean, understanding how significant it is, the thing someone's telling you. For example, the problem in this country is people slipping and falling in bathtubs. And therefore, we need a tax to rebuild everybody's bathtub. Being able to figure out how many people actually slip and fall in bathtubs, and comparing it to shark attacks, and comparing it to death by, drinking too much alcohol or a heart attack, or the likelihood of you dying in a car crash or crossing the street, or the example I gave you, which is statistically you're a lot more likely to get mugged if you walk. By the way, you can correlate it to the number of minutes you spend on the street in a bad neighborhood, right? So if you understand... Once you think about statistics is essential to do business because you have to pick. For example, what's the statistical likelihood that BlockFi, Celsius, and FTX are going to fail each year? Like that's counterparty risk. If you thought they were going to fail once in 100 years, that's a 1% risk a year, and you have to put a 1% premium on top. It turned out they were basically likely to fail within 36 months, so the risk premium was 36%, and if they were paying you an interest rate less than 40% on your money, you were statistically losing all your money. So understanding statistics and being able to apply it to business, to life, to your social life, that's kind of useful. It's useful in purchasing. It's useful in governance if you're ever a politician. If I actually shut down the entire economy of the state because I think there's a hurricane that's going to hit Miami? Okay, what's the statistical likelihood it hits Miami? What's the amount of damage it does when it hits Miami? What happens if it doesn't hit Miami? What's the cost of the shutdown in the state? Okay, that's something you kind of have to make a decision on when you decide where you're going to live. And if you're ever lucky enough to be a leader, you need to know that. And generally, when you do study statistics, you start to learn that most human interventions are iatrogenic. Iatrogenic being a long, complicated word for does more harm than good. When the cure is worse than the disease, most things are iatrogenic. So if the odds of you actually having a disease are 1 in a million, and the medicine is 99% effective, that means that 1% of a million people that take the medicine, right? And in this particular case, so 1%, 100,000, 10,000. So you got 10,000 people that take the medicine. One of them is going to die of the disease. So that means that in that case, 99.99% of the people that take the medicine are going to be sick from taking the medicine, and they're not going to be helped, right? But to figure that out, right, you have to understand, you have to ask some basic statistical questions, right? How likely is it, that thing that you fear is going to kill me or hurt me versus how much damage will your prescribed cure do to me? And we all had a lot of examples of that lately. So statistics, I think, is really valuable. And I guess I'll end with just practical suggestions on how to be successful. In every generation, there's a tool, a platform, a new thing, a new technology. And when that technology hits, if you take advantage of it in the first 5 years, you'll probably be immortalized. For example, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, if you look at all classic rock from 1969 to 1975, and you made a list of all the truly insanely great stuff done, and then you see an exponential decay in unique rock and roll music from that point forward, it gets exponentially harder. The piano, the work by Chopin, Beethoven, Mozart, extraordinary, gets exponentially harder to make a unique piano contribution. If you look at the mainframe, then the mini computer, then the PC, then the internet, you kind of want to, when you're coming of age, you ask the question, what's the new thing? What is the extraordinary thing now? If Michelangelo lived today, he wouldn't do what he did then. Just like if Beethoven lived today, you'd probably be seeing some exquisite, dynamic, metaversal, construct created. So there is human genius in every generation, and you have some talent. But the issue is, what do you harness? Is it Instagram? That's the old thing. Was it Snapchat? Was it, TikTok? Or in the current time period, this explosion of AI, AI, Mid-Journey, and chatbots and the like. I went to school at MIT, and the previous generation, the generation of engineers that put the man on the moon, they designed spaceships with slide rules. I used an HP 15C calculator. A decade later, they had spreadsheets on laptops. And I just think, man, I could have been 100x as effective if I had a spreadsheet on a laptop, and then they had the internet, and today, you could say, give me a Shakespearean sonnet, in the style of whatever about roses and Bitcoin. And, it's like, well, maybe 4 years of English literature studies down the drain, because, it turns out in some ways, the person that has no talent, like, yesterday was Mother's Day. I wanted to post a picture for Mother's Day. I went and first I went to Google. I Googled Bitcoin, Mother's Day, memes, nothing. Then I went to Twitter to all my memesters, like my favorite accounts that post memes. I'm like, okay, well, there's a mother, there's another one. I don't know if that'll play very well. Some people might not identify with, that image. So then I went to Mid-Journey and I typed Bitcoin bouquet, something like that. Bam. I got 12 different pictures. Click, 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 click. Ah, there's one with the Bitcoin in the middle and orange. And I like the orange and it's black background. Copy, paste. Okay. I just made it myself. And, I would say as an artist, I have no talent at all. And when I was going through school, I would not have been interested in art history or art, because if you take an art class, but you can't paint and you can't draw, right? This experience comes to a grinding halt in a hurry. But if I could roll the clock back and do it again, I would take a really detailed art class, because now what I realize is I can produce anything in any style and any texture, in the style of any of 10,000 artists, right? And then you start discovering light. There's like infinite light. There's infinite, I tripped over anodized titanium, and I was typing, give me a Bitcoin in anodized titanium. And it's posted on Twitter. It read really well, by the way. I didn't even know there was a style of anodized titanium. But once you have the tool in your hand, you realize that there's an entire language of imagery that professional photographers and professional artists, they know, and it was off limits to the layman until Midjourney or other AI generative tools. But today, you could generate your own music. You might generate your own video. You might generate your own art. You might generate your own songs, your own raps, your own whatever, and the ROI is much higher. Like I had 2 paintings on my yacht. I don't like the paintings. 20 years ago, you have to hire an artist to repaint them. This time around, I said, give me 2 Polynesian girls in the style of Kandinsky. And someone said, well, why don't you try this one? Plugged in another one. I spun up some images. I said, I shipped them off to, to a painting, like a 3D printer that does paintings on canvas. They come back. I'm going to put them on my boat. I do my own art. I can curate my own life. It's new platforms, new things. And sometimes, the old way was you're in a big organization surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people, and there's a big network. And, you can say 1/10 as much or 1/100th as much, and you're 100 times slower. And the new way is maybe it's Peter and Danny. And you're your own network, and you do what you want to do, and you're much more agile, and you've got more distribution channels, and you can create totally new forms of content never before possible. So I would say you look at the platforms of the day and ask the question: if I put an hour of work in, what gives me the biggest bang for the buck? And not to be Debbie Downer, but my advice is I wouldn't go back and try to replicate the successes of each previous generation of the people that are admired in the culture. They did the best they could at the time, but they were working in unfamiliar territory when they did it. So don't copy them. You can. It's okay to learn to play the guitar. Fine. I mean, but it's an avocation, right? It's for fun. It's a hobby. Like it's fun to play chess. Sure, play chess is a hobby. But the 2 most successful chess players, Hikaru and Magnus, they figured out that chess.com and they're streaming on Twitch. They're monetizing on chess.com. And the greatest example right now for those people that like chess is Magnus said, I'm not playing for the world championship in classical time format. I'm going to play rapid matches, blitz matches, etc. Well, the classical time format games are all boring. They take 4 hours to 6 hours. Who's going to watch a 6-hour chess game in the year 2023? And so they're just not good content. They're not fun. Everybody would rather watch 3-minute
sat in his bedroom
blitz
with his mates playing on Twitch.
And Hikaru, who probably he's the highest paid, wealthiest U.S. chess player. He plays on Twitch And he sits and he banters with his audience. He chats. People are like, man, you're not looking at it. It's like, what could I say, guys, man? This is just who I am.
Yeah.
What do you think about, such and such? Well, and he gives you political opinions. It's hilarious. He crushes his opponents. And he's got the chess.com logo on the bottom, and people are giving him tips or something on Twitch. He's like, I can only stream on Twitch, guys. That's just the rules. I don't make the rules, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, he posts on YouTube. And when you ask him what's his profession, he says, I'm not a chess player. I'm a streamer.
Yeah.
But like he's,
It's like what happened with cricket.
Guy thinks for himself.
Yeah.
So there we go. And end of sermon. Good luck.
Good luck, man. How was that?
You have the one thing, by
good.
the way, that no one else has, which is you're young, you have your youth, and anybody in their 40s, 60s, and 80s would pay nearly infinite to be sitting where you are right now, to have the tools at your disposal. So have at it.